Okay, let's dig into this. If you can, just picture this. You're standing there, base of this thing, this living thing, so huge, so ancient, it feels almost alien. You look up, way up, and the top just kind of disappears. That feeling, that's Sequoia National Park.
It really is awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
And it's not just the size, it's the history packed
Yeah.
into that place. Natural history, human history, it's all there.
Exactly. And we've got this great collection of sources you sent over articles, park docs, research feels like a good way to really get to the heart of what makes Sequoia special.
Yeah, that's the plan for this deep dive. Pull out the key stuff, the really important bits, like
Mhm.
why was it founded? What's so amazing about the science there, the human stories, and maybe most importantly, what challenges is it facing right this minute?
And this is fascinating right off the bat. Okay, it was the second U.S. national park. Yellowstone came first. But Sequoia, it was the first one created specifically to protect a living thing, these giant sequoia trees from, well, getting logged.
That's a huge point.
Think about that. Not just scenery, but protecting life. That was pretty revolutionary back then.
A total shift in thinking from just, oh, that's pretty, to
Right.
this ecosystem needs protection.
So yeah, officially established September 25, 1890. Yellowstone was earlier, but Sequoia had this unique life-saving mission.
And location-wise, it's tucked into the Sierra Nevada mountains, central California. It's also where you find Mount Whitney, highest peak in the lower 48 states, over 14,500 feet.
Wow. And maybe we should quickly clear this up because people mix them up all the time. We're talking giant sequoias, Sequoiadendron giganteum, not the coast redwood, Sequoia sempervirens.
Right, good distinction. They're related, sure, but different habitats. Coast redwoods,
Yeah.
coastal, obviously, can be taller. Some really push the limits, like over 380 feet.
Rare, yeah.
But giant sequoias, the ones at Sequoia National Park, they're inland up in the Sierra. And they are just massive in volume. They hold the title, largest living things on Earth by volume.
Okay, the science. Let's get into that. Not just tall, but like you said, largest by volume.
That volume is everything. The General Sherman tree, biggest one in the world, volume-wise. Its base, get this,
Yeah.
over 36 feet across.
36 feet.
Yeah. They're usually, 250, 300 feet tall? Impressive? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that incredible girth, often over 30 feet wide, sometimes 100 feet around, that gives them that sheer bulk.
In the sheer time they've been standing there.
Oh, absolutely. Among the oldest living things, period. Easily over 3,000 years old sometimes. There's one, CBR 26 they call it, dated to 3,266 years.
Wow. Imagine what that tree has seen.
It's mind-boggling. And part of that longevity comes down to some pretty amazing adaptations, like their bark.
Right, the bark is famous.
It's incredibly thick, could be up to 2 feet deep in places.
Yes.
And it's spongy, full of compounds that, they protect it from fire, like natural armor.
But then the roots, they're surprisingly shallow, aren't they?
They are, only maybe 6 to 12 feet deep, which sounds crazy for something so big. But they spread out really wide, and they often sort of weave together with the roots of neighboring trees. Helps keep them stable.
Strength in numbers.
Yeah, but that shallowness,
Yeah.
it makes them vulnerable. Changes in surface water, erosion, and especially, long droughts. That's a weak spot.
And fire. That's another paradox, right? They need it.
Absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
Their cones, they can stay shut tight on the tree for 20 years, holding onto the seeds, waiting for fire. The heat makes them pop open and release the seeds.
And the fire does more than just open the cones.
Oh, yeah. It clears out all the brush and dead stuff on the forest floor, stuff that would compete with the seedlings for sun and water. It basically creates these perfect little sunny patches of bare soil that the tiny sequoia seeds need to sprout. So historically, those lower intensity fires, they were essential.
Okay, which leads us straight into a huge modern problem the sources point out. For decades, maybe a century, the policy was fire suppression. Put out all the fire.
Exactly. And that seemed like a good idea, safety-wise, but it let all that undergrowth brush, smaller trees just build up and build up.
And dense green ladder fuels, right? That's the
Okay.
term.
That's it. Like kindling that lets a ground fire climb right up into the crowns of the giants.
So now, when a fire does start, maybe naturally or accidentally, there's so much fuel.
It burns incredibly hot.
Yeah.
Way hotter and more intensely than the historical fires these trees adapted to.
And that thick bark isn't enough anymore.
It gets overwhelmed. The heat is too intense for too long at the base, or the fire just races up those ladder fuels into the canopy. And the result? We're seeing catastrophic mortality. Huge, ancient trees dying in numbers never seen before. The very thing that helped them thrive is now in this altered state their biggest killer.
That's sobering. Shows how messing with natural processes, even with good intentions, can backfire so badly.
And it's not just their size or age. Ecologically, they're incredibly important as carbon sinks. They store massive amounts of carbon locked away for centuries, millennia even.
Which creates another paradox mentioned in the sources. They help fight climate change by storing carbon.
Right.
But now they're listed as endangered because of climate change.
Exactly. It's this vicious cycle. Climate change drives the drought and the intense fires that kill them. And when these massive carbon stores burn, all that carbon goes right back into the atmosphere, making the climate problem worse. A natural climate solution getting destroyed by the problem it helps solve.
Wow. Okay, beyond the trees themselves, the landscape has its own epic story, formed by, what, ancient granite?
Yeah, mostly granite from the Mesozoic era, deep underground. Then, much later during the Ice Ages, massive glaciers carved everything up, created those dramatic peaks and really deep canyons.
Like King's Canyon.
Kings Canyon is a prime example. One of the deepest glacier-carved canyons in North America. Just shows the raw power of that ice.
And something I didn't really know about the caves, there are marble formations.
Yes. It's kind of hidden geology. Over 200 known caves in the parks, mostly formed in marble, which is pretty unique for this era.
Over 200.
And they're still finding more. Lilburn Cave is the big one, California's longest, nearly 17 miles surveyed so far.
17 miles underground. And Crystal Cave, that's the famous one people can visit.
That's the show cave. It's beautiful, full of really fragile stuff, delicate rock curtains, stalagmites, these weird twisty things called helictites, even these big, rare shield formations.
Sounds amazing. Needs protecting, I guess.
Definitely. They're very sensitive. And good news, after being closed because of storm damage, Crystal Cave is set to reopen for tours on May 23, 2025. You absolutely need a guided tour, and you should probably plan for half a day for the whole thing.
Good tip. And all that elevation change in the park from foothills way up to Mount Whitney, that creates tons of different habitats, right?
Huge variety. You go from like oak woodlands and chaparral down low, up through different conifer forests, montane meadows, subalpine zones, all the way to alpine rock and tundra.
Which means lots of different plants and animals.
Rich biodiversity, yeah.
Yeah.
But many species are feeling the pressure. The sources flag a few, like the Pacific fisher it's threatened, the small forest mammal, and really vulnerable when big wildfires rip through its habitat. Or the mountain yellow-legged frog. It's endangered, facing this triple whammy. Non-native fish eating the young, a deadly fungus spreading, and climate change messing with its high-altitude home.
That's tough.
And there's a threatened little current golden trout, too, native only to streams in that area, and of course black bears. Very common, and we definitely need to talk about living alongside them safely.
Yeah, we'll circle back to that. But you mentioned earlier this idea of climate change as a multiplier threat.
That's the key takeaway, I think. It's not just one more problem. The rising temperatures, the drought, they make everything else worse. They stress the trees directly, making them susceptible to beetle attacks. They change how fire behaves. They reduce the snowpack, which affects water supplies downstream. They shrink habitat for the frogs and fish.
It connects everything.
Exactly. It's a cascade effect across the whole system. We've seen it doubling tree death rates and other types of old-growth forests nearby. It really drives home that you need a big-picture, climate-aware strategy to protect this place.
Let's shift to the human side of the story now. Because this land wasn't empty before it was a park. It's ancestral homeland.
Absolutely. For time immemorial, this was home to the Mono, Yokuts, Tabachalabal, Paiute, and Western Shoshone peoples.
They lived with the land, right? Not just on it.
A deep symbiotic relationship. Their traditional ways, hunting, gathering plants, making baskets, using tobacco, were all tied to the health and rhythms of the environment. Sustainable living, really.
And even though they were forcibly displaced, those connections remain strong today.
Very strong. The Park Service works with the federally recognized tribes, acknowledging that history and their ongoing cultural ties, and importantly, recognizing that traditional ecological knowledge, their deep understanding of the land, is incredibly valuable for conservation today. How do you manage resources sustainably? They knew.
So back to the park's founding, 1890, protect the sequoias. And nearby General Grant National Park, that was added later to Kings Canyon, right?
Yeah, General Grant was established just a week after Sequoia, mainly for the General Grant tree grove. Eventually, it became part of the much larger Kings Canyon National Park when that was created.
And before the Park Service existed, the Army ran the show.
That's right. From 1891 to 1913, the U.S. Army cavalry troops were the first protectors, the first superintendents, really.
Which leads to this really important, often forgotten story, the Buffalo Soldiers.
Yes, a significant contribution. Around 500 African-American soldiers served tours in both Sequoia and Yosemite back then.
And they weren't just ceremonial, they were doing the hard work.
Absolutely. They were the rangers, kicking out poachers, fighting fires, stopping illegal sheep and cattle grazing, building the first roads and trails. Real foundational work.
And doing it while facing intense racism.
Pervasive prejudice, both within the military structure and from the public. Their service is this powerful intersection of the conservation movement, post-Civil War history, and the fight for racial justice. It's a story that deserves to be told more.
And Colonel Charles Young is a key figure here.
A remarkable figure. Third black graduate of West Point. He served as acting superintendent of Sequoia in 1903. Got a lot done, especially extending the road network further into the giant forest.
But before protection came exploitation. Those trees looked like dollar signs to some people.
Oh, absolutely. When the groves were discovered by settlers, the immediate thought was timber. Vast returns, as one source put it. Logging really hit its peak between 1880 and 1900.
And Converse Basin was ground zero for that.
It was the site of the most extensive logging. It used to be maybe the largest grove anywhere before they cut it so heavily.
But here's that wild fact from the sources again. It never actually made a profit.
Isn't that something? All that effort, all that destruction, and the logging operation in Converse Basin apparently never paid for itself.
Why not?
The trees were just too big, incredibly difficult and expensive to cut down with the technology then. And the terrain. Rugged mountains. They had to build these elaborate, costly systems, huge wooden flumes, basically water slides for lumber, and early railroads just to try and get the wood out. It was a logistical nightmare.
That destruction, though, it did help fuel the conservation movement.
It did. Seeing that level of destruction spurred people on. Conservationists, concerned citizens, they pushed harder for preservation, led to things like the early land grants, then the parks in 1890, and other forest preserves.
So how were the remaining groves saved?
A mix of things. Some private individuals bought up groves just to protect them. The government also acquired land, and that logged over Converse Basin. The Forest Service eventually bought it. Later in the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, came in and did a lot of cleanup and replanting work.
And trees are growing back there now.
Young sequoias are coming back, yeah. It's a long road to recovery, but it's happening. And thankfully today, something like 92% of the big old-growth sequoias are protected within parks or forests. You can still see remnants of the old logging days, like cabin foundations in places like Converse Basin.
Okay, let's talk about actually being there. What should you absolutely see and do? The giant trees, obviously.
Number one, for sure. Seeing the General Sherman tree,
Yeah.
you just have to. It puts everything in perspective. And the Congress Trail, right nearby in the giant forest, it's an easy walk. And you're just surrounded by giants. It's immersive.
And for people needing easier access.
The Big Trees Trail is perfect. It's a 1.2-mile boardwalk loop, totally flat, wheelchair and stroller friendly. Great way for everyone to get right up close to these massive trees. Oh, and tunnel log, the drive-through tree. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a classic photo op.
Beyond the trees, those granite domes are pretty spectacular. Morro Rock.
Yeah, Morro Rock is iconic. It's about 350 steps carved into the granite. Takes you right to the top. The views are just, wow. Panoramic sweep of the Great Western Divide Mountains. Super popular, especially at sunset, so expect crowds.
And the caves. Crystal Cave, reopening May 2025.
Right. Definitely book a tour for that if you're there after it reopens. It's a whole different world. Underground, delicate formations, really cool geology. Plan a few hours for it.
How about getting around? Any favorite drives or hikes?
The General's Highway is the main artery connecting the different areas, and it's scenic in itself. For hikes, Cocopa Falls is a popular one, especially when the water's flowing well. Down in the foothills, the Marble Falls Trail is great in the spring, usually April, for wildflowers.
Nice. Less crowded sunset spots?
Yeah, if Morro Rock is packed, try Beetle Rock or Sunset Rock. They're near the Giant Forest Museum, easy walks, great views, fewer people, and winter. Snowshoeing, cross-country skiing. It's magical when it's snowy. And for the really adventurous, there's backpacking. The High Sierra Trail starts there, goes all the way towards Mount Whitney. Requires permits and serious planning, though.
But what if you want that Sequoia magic without the big crowds? Find some solitude.
Ah, the best-kept secrets.
Yeah.
The sources have some good tips. For quieter groves, try hiking into Muir Grove or Redwood Mountain Grove. Redwood Mountain is actually the largest grove by area, but since you have to hike a bit to get into the main part, it gets way fewer visitors.
Okay, good to know.
Even parts of the giant forest can be quiet. The northern loop of the Trail of the Sequoias, for instance. For real solitude, backpacking is the way. The Garfield Trail to Garfield Grove is mentioned as being pretty remote.
And that Mineral King area you
Oh,
mentioned.
Mineral King.
Yeah.
It's special. A high elevation valley, around 7,500 feet. Stunning scenery, great base for alpine hikes. The road in is, well, it's long, narrow, and slow. That keeps a lot of people away.
Oh, it's worth the drive.
Absolutely, if you want solitude and beauty. You can even camp right among sequoias there at Atwell Mill Campground.
Other quieter viewpoints.
Little Baldy Dome offers amazing 360-degree views, less known than Morro Rock. Eagle View is another alternative for similar vistas with fewer people. And over in the Kingdom Canyon side, Buena Vista Peak, Silliman Pass for high country views, or just relaxing by Sheep Creek Cascade near Cedar Grove.
Okay, let's shift gears to something really crucial for any visit. Sharing the park with black bears.
Right, super important both for visitor safety and for the bears themselves. Conflicts usually happen over one thing, human food. Exactly. Whether it's food left out at a campsite, trash not secured, or, worst case, people actually feeding them. And that's where how you behave as a visitor directly impacts conservation.
Because once a bear gets conditioned to human food,
It's usually a downward spiral. They start associating people with easy meals, become bolder, damage property trying to get food, can potentially injure someone. And sadly, that often means the bear has to be put down. It's tragic and often preventable.
so the rules are strict for a reason. Store everything with a smell. Food, drinks, toiletries, trash in a bear locker or a proper bear-resistant container. Always. Camping, picnicking, even in your car sometimes. And never, ever feed wildlife.
And if you see a bear, keep your distance. The guideline is at least 150 feet, think 4 school bus lengths. If it notices you and you're closer than that, back away slowly.
What if it comes towards you?
Don't panic. Stand tall. Make yourself look big. If you're with others, group up. Make lots of noise. Yell firmly, "Hey bear, get out of here." Wave your arms. You want to scare it off and teach it that humans aren't worth approaching. And definitely don't surround it or get between a mom and her cubs. If it manages to grab your food, let it go. It's not worth fighting a bear over a sandwich.
What about those bluff charges you sometimes hear about?
Yeah, they can happen. Usually it's intimidation, huffing, slapping the ground, maybe a short rush forward that stops. The advice is stand your ground, keep yelling, look big, don't run. Running can trigger a chase response. Actual predatory attacks are incredibly rare, but if one were to happen, you fight back with everything you've got.
It's good that groups like the Sequoia Parks Conservancy actively support programs to help prevent these conflicts. It really highlights how much our actions matter.
So looking towards the future, Sequoia and Kings Canyon are facing some really serious environmental threats. The sources use strong language like unique and devastating consequences from things like air pollution and climate change.
We're already seeing the warming trend, right? And the projections show it could get much worse.
Yeah, temperatures have been rising and could go up several more degrees Celsius by 2100 if emissions stay high. And even if rainfall doesn't change much, warmer temps mean more evaporation, which just dries everything out faster. We saw how human-caused climate change made that 2012-2014 drought in California much worse.
And that drought period, 2012 to 2016, was called a tipping point for the forests there.
It really was, caused huge sudden changes. And the outlook isn't great higher chances of severe drought soon, maybe even mega droughts later this century.
Plus, the snowpack is shrinking.
That's a huge concern. Snowpack acts like a natural reservoir, melting slowly to provide water through the dry season. But it's declining, especially at lower and mid-elevations. Some projections show it could almost disappear at lower elevations if things get warm enough.
And all of this, the heat, the drought, less snow, feeds into the massive tree deaths and those horrific wildfires we talked about.
Exactly. It all connects. That stress doubled death rates in some forests. During that big drought, over 100 million trees died across California, partly because bark beetles attacked weakened trees.
And that statistic about the sequoias themselves, 13 to 19% of all large sequoias killed in just 2 years, 2020 and 2021.
It's staggering.
Wow.
The KNP complex fire, the Windy fire, they burned so intensely, with that high-severity fire reaching the crowns that was just outside anything these trees evolved with. Even native bark beetles, which usually don't kill healthy sequoias, are now killing drought-stressed ones.
And on top of all that, air pollution.
Yeah, air quality can be really bad, some of the worst in the national park system, mostly blowing in from outside the park.
And that hurts the trees too.
Definitely. Hazy skies are one thing, but ground-level ozone actually damages the sequoia needles, slows their growth. It's just another stressor piling on, making them weaker against everything else: drought, insects, fire. Groups like the MPCA are pushing for cleaner air policies because of this.
Wow, it's a lot. A really complex set of interconnected threats, all amplified by the changing climate.
It is challenging,
Hmm.
but it's not hopeless. There's a lot of dedicated work happening. The Park Service is leading, but they get crucial help from the Sequoia Parks Conservancy, their official nonprofit partner.
SPC helps fund projects.
Yeah, they raise money for all sorts of things, protecting resources, preserving the land, improving visitor access and education. Vital support. A huge focus now, obviously, is fire management, trying to undo the legacy of fire suppression. That means using prescribed fire, carefully planned, controlled burns under specific weather conditions.
To reduce the fuel buildup.
Exactly. And also managing some lightning-caused fires, letting them burn naturally where it's safe and beneficial. The goal is to bring back the lower intensity fire that the ecosystem, especially the sequoias, needs. Yosemite's Mariposa Grove is a great example. Decades of prescribed burning there really helped it survive a recent large wildfire. Fuel reduction is probably the key adaptation strategy right now.
So they're actively setting fires.
Yes, planned burns are happening. And sometimes they might even allow patches of high-severity fire in very specific situations if it meets ecological goals. But that's carefully managed. There's also ongoing research on how best to help areas recover after severe fires, including weather and how to replant sequoias.
And SPC helps with wildlife, too.
Right. They support programs like the bear conflict reduction work we mentioned, efforts to reintroduce Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep, and the complex work to save the mountain yellow-legged frogs removing invasive fish, treating the frogs for that deadly fungus. Plus, work on the little current golden trout. Infrastructure-wise, we mentioned Crystal Cave aiming to reopen May 23, 2025. There's also ongoing road work, like on the Mineral King Road, and repairs from recent storm damage on other roads, so visitors should always check conditions before they go.
And the park management itself is adapting.
Very much so. There's a big focus on adaptive management, using science to guide decisions and adjusting as they learn more. The proposed NPS budget for 2025 actually includes increases for things like climate initiatives and conservation science. Research priorities include understanding drought impacts better, monitoring alpine areas, and fire ecology. SPC keeps funding recovery from the KMP fire, education, trails, and the Park Service is using new frameworks to think about climate adaptation, deciding whether to try and resist change, accept it, or actively direct the ecosystem towards a new state that might be more resilient in the future. Even considering things like assisted migration for some species down the road.
So wrapping this up, Sequoia National Park. It's this incredibly powerful place, isn't it? Founded to protect life itself, home to Earth's biggest trees, steeped in human history from indigenous peoples to the Buffalo Soldiers.
But as our deep dive shows, it's facing this incredibly urgent moment. That phrase tipping point really feels accurate. Climate change, air pollution, they're causing devastating losses, hitting the iconic sequoias hard, and impacting the whole web of life there.
Which means preserving it isn't just a local issue. It needs global action on climate change, continued support for the conservation work happening right there in the park, and all of us, when we visit, need to be responsible stewards. Tread lightly, follow the rules.
And maybe a final thought for you to carry away. These giant sequoias have survived for thousands of years through countless changes. What does their current struggle, driven largely by human activity, tell us about our own relationship with the planet right now? It's a heavy question, but one worth considering. What's our responsibility to these ancient giants?